Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome all to the Healthcare Leaders of New York, HLNY WittKieffer session, the executive recruitment process, what to know before, during, and after. My name is Carla Marie Memnon, and I'm the president of Healthcare Leaders of New York. I'm excited to have you all with us for the third webinar as part of our Executive Essential Career Professional Development series in collaboration with WittKieffer. This will truly be an educational program. In this session, you'll learn more about what to consider before the job search, what to do and not do, and through every key phase of the search and beyond. This session is approved for one qualifying education credit by ACHE. Please visit ACHE to self-record your credit. Participants in this program who wish to have it considered for ACHE qualifying education credits should list their attendance when they apply to the American College of Healthcare Executive for advancement or recertification. A copy of this afternoon's presentation will be distributed after the event. It is now my honor to introduce our moderator for the session, Paul Bone, Managing Partner. Paul?
Carla Marie, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and we'll have some quick introductions for our team. But first, just thank you again for the partnership with HLNY. We're pleased to help with supporting the career and professional development of your members. So we'll start with some quick introductions. Lisa?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Paul. So my name is Lisa DeSimone-Arthur. I've been at WittKieffer for almost 20 years, and I'm a principal in our firm's healthcare practice, and I'm based in New York City. So nice to be here.
Thanks, Lisa. Keisha?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Keisha Harris. I'm a consultant here at WittKieffer. I have been with the firm for 6 years. I've been doing work in the executive search space for the last 10 years. So again, based out of Atlanta, sit in our healthcare practice, and really excited to be here with you all today.
And thrilled to be joined by my colleagues. I'm Paul Boney, managing partner with WittKieffer, celebrating my 30th year with WittKieffer, and again, delighted to be with you this afternoon. So to get launched, I want to first start by acknowledging that career planning and the job search process we know can be very intimidating and a very daunting aspect for most people, regardless of where you may be in your career. And we know that some of you joining have navigated several job selection processes and have been on a path providing a variety of experiences and learnings, and others are newer in their journey. But what's true is that most of you will at some point in time put yourselves forward as a candidate for consideration. And because what you put forward is not a product or a service, it's you. It naturally stirs a lot of internal questions when one does so. Am I ready? It's what's the right next step for me? What do I really want? How do I really know the organization that I'm considering? How strong of a candidate will I be? So those are common questions that we all have at some point in our careers. So the goal that we have for the discussion today is to give you some frameworks and to give you some ideas and our perspectives that can support how you plan, how you prepare as a candidate, and give yourself as much clarity to reduce the ambiguity that can sometimes go with recruitment processes. That includes even how recruiters work. So we're going to put some light on our role and demystify aspects that sometimes are not understood about the role of recruiters. But we want today to give you some ideas that will give you confidence and clarity in how you put yourself forward, because with confidence and clarity, I think we know it helps to reduce the natural fears and the insecurities that can happen when we put ourselves forward as candidates. So next slide, please, Somya. So the discussion framework today is really based on a a cycle of the selection process, if you will. Keisha is going to address the considerations before you get into a selection process, aspects of how preparation is important. I'm going to touch on briefly ways to optimize your candidacy when you've put yourself forward. And Lisa will talk about the selection process, ways that you can navigate that process effectively. And then we're going to touch on aspects of transitions, if one is successful, ways of exiting and things to think about when you leave an organization and enter an organization, and ways to move forward when we're not successful in a selection process, and just ways to handle that aspect as well. And so, of course, we could spend a couple of hours on each of these items, and we don't have time for all of those. We will want to make sure we have 15 or so minutes for questions at the end. Please enter questions in the chat. We will answer some of those as we go, but really do want to get through our content and material, and we'll make sure that we have time for questions as we get through it. And of course, our slides will be available to you as well. So I'm going to turn to Keisha, next slide, please, who's going to talk about the before aspect.
Thanks, Paul. So before you engage in any search process, any executive recruitment process, you need to make sure that you're search ready. Those early stages of preparation, just understanding, what you're looking for, what's next for you is going to be key in the job search. So our team, so the search consultant that you're working with, the hiring authority, the organization you're working with, they're going to want to know, why are you engaging in this process? So they want to know why, what changed, why now, what in this particular role is of interest for you, and why would you be looking to join our organization? And that pre-work, that preparation helps you better understand your answers to those questions. Also keep in mind, the average executive recruitment process will last about 4 months. For some roles, that actually may go closer to 6 months. So there is a bit of a time commitment here. So again, a reason why that preparation is needed on the front end. So if we can go to the next slide here. It's really important to take the time for self-reflection and really understanding and clarifying the goals that you set for yourself. So first, you need to take the time to think about what's next for you. So what are your short and long-term goals? And we always say you shouldn't always think about the next job. You need to be thinking about 2 jobs out, 3 jobs out. That helps you to understand, what are the specific skills and competencies that I want to acquire in my next opportunity. Your next position should fully prepare you for your ultimate goal. And then that leads to prioritizing your professional development. So what's important? Is it getting an elevated title? Is it increasing your scale, your scope, maybe the revenue that you're responsible for? Is it operating in a different type of environment or setting? So we hear all the time, hey, I'm in a traditional hospital, community healthcare setting. I'd love to get academic experience. I love to get for-profit experience. So what do you need to step into that next role? And then it can be gaining a new skill set. It could be, maybe I want to take on a construction project. I've never worked on that before, or I've never experienced working with a growth-oriented organization, or I've never worked in a specific service line. So when you're thinking about opportunities, really focus on your professional development, align that opportunity with what you're looking for. The last thing I will cover as far as clarifying your goals is really knowing your motivators and knowing your deal breakers. This is typically an area where searches can go sour because we know the things we want to focus on. We may look beyond those things because, hey, it's a step up in title, but the location doesn't work for you. So maybe you're looking for something more rural, but the opportunity is more urban. Compensation isn't aligned. The title isn't what you're looking for. Reporting structure, flexibility, the list can go on and on. It's okay to have a list of deal breakers and things that you say, hey, this may not make the most sense for me and my family. You should be open as you look at opportunities, but really understand your deal breakers before you officially toss your name in for an opportunity. Because again, 4 to 6 month commitment. So we don't want to get to the end of things and figure out, hey, this location just doesn't work for the family. And we always knew the location. So understand your deal breakers, communicate your deal breakers. We can go to the next slide. The next thing is really understanding and managing your brand. This really gets into self-awareness as you enter the executive recruitment process. So, what I would challenge all of you to do is, really focus on, what is your elevator pitch? What defines you and differentiates you from other people? But I would challenge you to go ask people, what do you think about me? How has it been working with me? I would ask your manager, your peers, your direct reports. I would also ask people that you may not have worked with that just know you from the industry. Being able to perform that 360 assessment will allow you to really take a look at how am I viewed by other people and how do I want to be viewed, and really reconciling the two, figuring out where are the gaps, where are there opportunities to improve, really making sure that, before you throw your name in, before you raise your hand for an opportunity, that, you are communicating the professional brand that you want to be known for, and that you want to be seen for in the industry, in your organization, within your department as well. And we can go to the next slide here. And so, once you take the time to think about your goals, and then you take the time to really take a look at your brand and what you're known for, the next thing is really to ask yourself a few questions before you throw your name in for an opportunity. Again, it all goes back to self-reflection, and this just saves us and you a lot of time later on in the search. So the first question I would ask yourself is, what are the reasons to consider leaving your current organization? Have you achieved the goals or gained the skills that you sought out with joining this organization? Have you completed the major projects or initiatives that you were charged with? Are there potential growth opportunities? Can you change departments? Is there a new project that's coming down the pipe that may be something of interest for you? Really reflect on your current environment and really think about, what will you be walking away from if you were to accept another opportunity? That leads us to trade-offs. So again, what are you walking away from? Do you have a non-compete that we need to think of? A repayment of a sign-on bonus you maybe got a couple years ago. Is there an upcoming bonus? Is there LTI? Do you have stocks that will be vesting soon? These are all things to really think about before considering new opportunities. In the age that we're in now with technology, when it comes to flexibility, if you're fully remote, is that something that you're looking for in your next opportunity? That may be something that keeps you in your current organization. This is one of the biggest impediments to a search process, really understanding the trade-offs, really making sure the time is right, everything is aligned, now makes sense to make a change. Timing, does it work for your family? Do you have any personal challenges? Again, this is a 4 to 6 month process. Also look at the market. What types of people are stepping into the roles that you're considering? Look at their experience, their educational background, the types of organizations that they work with. Network with people that you are familiar with to get their thoughts, to really determine, hey, am I competitive in the market right now with the experiences that I have? And then going back to what we talked about initially, really make sure that this next step, this opportunity, is aligned with your long-term career aspirations. Next slide. We won't get into too much detail here, but the final thing you need to do as you're preparing to participate in the executive job search process is update your materials. So remember that the purpose of your resume or your CV is to really get you in the door for a screen or an interview. So really make sure your resume is showcasing your experience, your knowledge, your career progression. We want to see what you walked into and how did you improve your current organization. Also, another area to think about is your digital presence. Really make sure that your LinkedIn, your social media is reflecting your resume. You want to make sure there's alignment. You also want to be active, publish knowledge, like and share information. even if it's just from your organization or maybe from a friend. Engage with your network and manage your digital footprint. That goes back to the branding aspect of what we discussed earlier. So we are at our first poll question here. So we can go to the next slide and launch the poll. So what we'd like to learn is, are any of you planning to look for a new job in the next 12 months? And Paul, I'd love to ask you, from your perspective, what do you think is kind of most important as candidates are preparing for a job search process?
Yeah, thanks, Keisha. It just maybe a few reflections on the resume aspect, since, as you know, all of us are asked all the time to give feedback on resumes, and we could spend a lot of times on resumes. I think sometimes I'm asked, isn't there a 2-page rule or a 3-page rule? And I don't know where that rule came up, but it's just not true. Obviously, you want to be succinct and focused and clear in a resume, and if you're able to do that in 2 or 3 pages, that's great. But if it takes you 4 or 5 pages, that's okay. There's obviously a correlation if you're out 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the working world, and you send a 12-page resume. I might have questions about how you're focusing, but I think the biggest advice, just in a nutshell, I'd give on resumes is the balance of qualitative and quantitative accomplishments. Tell the readers about the body of your work and what you've gotten done. You and team, by the way. If I see a lot of I on resumes, I'm gonna probe on that. But I think also give your readers a good, brief, succinct description of the organizations that you're a part of. Don't make them have to research what's the size, employees, revenue. Good to have just a few sentences that helps to describe the places that you've been. So just a few comments.
I'm just going to add 1 or 2 things there, Paul. I think it's also super important that the resume be consistent in terms of format. So what we often see, and I think we've all done this at times, is we keep adding on our next job to a resume that existed prior, and that often creates a very inconsistent resume. The other thing that I think is important is to be more reflective about specific goals and objectives versus tactical, repetitive responsibilities. So, especially when you're looking for a C-suite job, there's less concern about your direct responsibility and more concern from the recruiter's end about what you've achieved, what you've accomplished, how you've leveraged teams to do that work.
Great. We got the poll response here, and it shows that 82% of you are planning to look for a new job in the next 12 months. And I think that reflects what we've been seeing in the recruitment market on our end. We're seeing more people raising their hands for opportunities, more activity, just more openness to look at opportunities and roles. All right, Paul, I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, great. Our next slide, please, Soumya. So we want to talk a little bit about ways that you can optimize your candidacy. And first, and next slide. Thank you, Soumya. Want to touch just briefly on our role. And there's a variety of recruiters. There's a whole ecosystem of a variety of different kind of recruiters. WittKieffer is a retained executive search firm. What that means is that we work exclusively on behalf of our client organizations that pay us. So while our obligation is ultimately to our clients, we have to have, as do other retained firms, trusting, close relationships with individuals. So our role it really wears multiple hats. It's to obviously help shepherd the search process, to organize the effort for our clients, but working with candidates, we can be a sounding board. We can be a support. We can help you as you put your best foot forward as part of a selection process. By virtue of the work that we do, we obviously have a lens on the market and trends, things that we know about organizations. So, excuse me, my advice would be to really exploit the kind of relationships that you can build with recruiters. Ask their advice, ask for their insights, ask for their feedback following your interview. And again, it's important to obviously have relationships with a variety of recruiters, because they can certainly be a key aspect of helping you with your not just your job search, but even thinking about your longer term career growth. Thanks, Soumya. Next slide. So I want to offer a few comments, and now we're getting to the stage here where you've put yourself forward in a selection process. And again, we could spend a lot of time talking about interviewing, but here's an inventory of some advice. When you're interviewing, first and foremost, be your authentic self. You want to be the best version of that authentic self, as I sometimes say to candidates. And as Keisha was talking about earlier, get feedback on the ways that you come across, how you carry yourself, how you make what I call your net impression. What's the net impression that people have of me when they're experiencing me, in a conversation, in an interview? And there's always aspects to pay attention to maybe amplify. Again, still being authentic, not being disingenuous, but sometimes we all have to turn up or down our amplifiers in ways that can maximize that kind of impression. I think that building trust and connection with the person who's interviewing you is I think sometimes an underestimated aspect with candidates. Is sometimes we see candidates that frankly can land pretty hot when they're coming in for an interview. They may be quick to want to impress us, make their strong case on their candidacy, and we understand that. But take a beat and establish that common ground with the person that you're working with, and that means asking great questions. If there's a pet peeve I have when I ask a candidate, what questions do you have? And the answer is none at this time. Always have questions, and have questions that are meaningful and that are thoughtful and that are going to establish that you are an intellectually curious person and really seeking to understand that role and that opportunity. I would say to you that a common derailer for candidates when interviewing is over talking. And because sometimes naturally people can get excited, nervous, amped up. That's understandable. But I would say that most candidates talk themselves out of jobs. So just be mindful to have the right give and take in a conversation. It's obviously incumbent on a candidate to succinctly and clearly offer accomplishments, make the clear case for what differentiates you, as Keisha was talking about earlier. I think one of the better questions that I encourage candidates to ask when they're interviewing is, if I were in this role for a year and you were to tell me that I did a great job, what would I have done specifically? What would have happened? Tell me the top 3 or 4 specific measures of success that you have for this role. It really forces the interviewer to unpack a lot about how they're setting expectations. And by the way, if you're meeting with multiple people as part of a selection process, asking that same question of everyone allows you to gauge the degree of consistency or inconsistency that there may be with how people are seeing the role. Next slide, please, Soumya. So I'm a big believer, we are big believers in wanting to give our clients, when we're starting a search process, to hold up a mirror, essentially, and say to them, here are several dimensions that candidates will be pressure testing this opportunity. So it allows us and the work that we do with our clients to, in essence, take some inventory of what things to prepare for when candidates are interviewing for a role. So the flip of this applies to you. And when you are interviewing, have rigor for what you need to make sure will help you to have as much discernment as possible about that opportunity. And so, as you can see on this list, it's about pressure testing the all-important aspect of culture. How are decisions made? How does the leadership structure either support success for this role? And are there any aspects of the structure that could impede success of this role? Are there things that, as you pressure test on that issue, that you might need to advocate for around structure? Have we considered whether it's a dotted line reporting relationship to someone else or whatever the issue might be? Looking at the track record of growth for whatever organization you're evaluating, what's the digital capabilities and infrastructure with this organization you're evaluating? What's the board? Is there turnover, by the way, on the board? And going back to the leadership team, how stable is the leadership team? How much turnover has there been? Asking people that you meet with as you interview to talk about what's strong about the culture, what are the opportunities for the culture to be stronger, can be a great way to get people talking so that you're informed. I would say to you that a common refrain that we unfortunately will sometimes hear when we're hearing from somebody who's been in an organization for maybe 6 or 12 months, relatively short time, and they're looking at another job. And of course, we're going to ask, why are you looking so soon? And when we hear, there's things here that surprised me. There are things here that I just was unaware of when I interviewed. Now, sometimes that's going to happen. Interviewing is not foolproof in terms of having 100% clarity on the organization and the role that you're looking into. But it's always incumbent, right, to do really careful pressure testing of the kind of opportunity that you're evaluating. What's the total reward package? Obviously, base salary, always important, but evaluating the total compensation and the total rewards is also going to be critical, because there may be benefit related issues important for you and your family that are really going to be, as Keisha said, the deal breakers. Commitment to D&I, do the words that an organization may have on its website line up to reality? Or do you see evidence through the composition of the team, the structures, the aspects of DE&I to really believe that, again, the organization is walking its talk in terms of its commitment? Next slide, please, Sonia. Here is our next poll question. So with the vast majority of you considering making a move, this is a multiple choice question, and this is really to get at why you might be considering making a move. And so please select any of these aspects that might apply to why you are considering a change.
And Paul, we had a question come in on the chat while you were speaking about gaining feedback and how that is often more difficult to gain outside of the recruitment process. So I don't know if you and Keisha would like to weigh in on your thoughts about that, about how a candidate or an individual would get feedback outside of the recruitment process, how they would get that active feedback.
Yeah, Keisha, can you jump in?
Yeah. So I would say from a search consultant perspective, I actively give candidates that I work with feedback throughout the entire process. I tell them the things that they're great at that they should continue to do, that they should go, like Paul mentioned, amplify throughout the process. But I also say, hey, these are some things I noticed, like maybe let's work on that elevator pitch a little bit more. Let's work on, being a little bit more concise, a little more succinct. And as they advance in the process and we start getting some client feedback, we'll share some things that, that can be adjusted or shifted, because we do want to make sure that you are in a position to put your best foot forward. Of course, we keep in mind, we are working with other candidates as well. So we're also having the same conversations with others, but actively throughout the process, we're providing feedback. And then at the end of a recruitment process, let's say someone isn't selected for the opportunity, I will give them some feedback as they're looking for their next role. And typically I'll say, hey, if you want to connect again, in 2 weeks or a month, because it's disappointing. And sometimes you need to take some time to really think about the process, to really reflect. And let's revisit the conversation and think about, how we can make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. How can you make sure that you're being the best candidate that you could be? And honestly, sometimes the other candidate just wins out. Like we can't get a reason from the client. Sometimes someone else just may show up better that day. Sometimes it comes down to, a fit thing, which I hate throwing that term out there, but sometimes some people click a little more and that becomes a thing as well. So we try to give as much feedback as possible. We ask the organizations that we work with, hey, what can we share? Because we want to make sure that this goes back to on our side with relationship building, because if we work together again, we want to make sure that there's trust there and we're continuing to improve on those interviewing skills. It's a long answer.
Paul, any thoughts about that?
No, that was well covered.
Great. I'm just going to make one quick comment there, if the group would allow me. I think it's important in terms of outside of the recruitment process to be very proactive in seeking that feedback from your mentors, from people who are peers within your organization. We have found that if people make a conscious effort and they kind of create a safe space to get that honest feedback, that they will get it. All that being said, I think if someone is not going out of their way, often in those environments, to secure that feedback, they may not get it. So I would say be proactive, be focused, and really make it clear that you're looking to grow professionally and that you're open to things that may be difficult to hear at some times.
Can everyone see the answers to this poll? The poll is on the screen. I just want to make sure. Yes. So this is, obviously 78% of you looking to advance, very understandable, increasing your scope budget, 38%. I'll call out the aspect of burnout. We certainly know that it's a very real issue, as so many leaders are, facing capacity challenges, obviously, because of the resource constraints of so many organizations, which also shows up on our poll. There's just a lot on people's plates. So certainly encourage all of you who may have answered to that to, find the ways for self-care, asking for supports, and doing the things to, help you on that important topic. Oops. Next slide, please. Lisa, thanks for jumping in to talk about the search process.
Thanks, Paul. So I think first and foremost, it's important to say that we have found that many candidates feel that the search process is a great mystery, and it causes a lot of anxiety because they don't really understand the ins and outs of it. So what we're going to do today is go through the basic search process and maybe offer some additional comments. So when you're working with a retained search firm, they're likely doing some very extensive intake meetings, meeting with constituents throughout the organization, trying to understand the specific goals and objectives for the role, as well as the ideal candidate in terms of experience, background, etc. Once we're done with those meetings, we are putting together a very extensive leadership profile, which is ultimately approved by our client organization. And what that profile will do, what it will contain, is not only information about the organization, but also extensive information about goals, objectives, responsibilities, and experience. So for your purposes as potential candidates, that's really the first document that you're going to want to review to understand the role and to really decide whether or not this is a job that is aligned with your goals, your personal goals and objectives. We certainly will reach out to people proactively, as I think many of you have probably experienced that, by email, by phone. We'll do that often for two reasons. We'll do that, number one, to see if you're potentially interested in a job, but we'll also do that to find out if you know of anyone else who might be appropriate for the role. But if you're raising your hand and expressing that interest, you will get that leadership profile, that job description, if you will, kind of on steroids. You'll get that as the first point of contact for the role. The next part of the process will be, you'll send us a resume, and then we will reach out to you to schedule a phone screen. So the phone screen typically is about 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And that's an opportunity not only for us to learn more about you, but for you to learn more about the organization and the role in particular. So kind of going back to Keisha's earlier discussion about what are your motivators, what are the things that matter to you, that's the time when you really kind of bring all of that stuff front of mind so that you can understand, is this the right job for me? Is this what I'm interested in? Certainly, as we've talked about before, that's also the time when you're going to find out from the recruiter, from the search consultant, is this a 5-day in the office type job? Do you need to relocate for the position? What are the compensation expectations for the role? Those are all things that you should find out so that we're aligned early in the process. But assuming, that all of that is aligned, I think there's also a strong opportunity for you to understand more about the job from the search consultant directly. I will say this, I think it's important to review that profile and come to that initial phone screen having done your homework about the organization. What we sometimes see is someone gets on a phone screen and the first 3 or 4 questions they're asking are literally in paragraph 1 of the leadership profile. So that frankly causes us some concern because it says that either the person's not really interested in the role or they're not kind of bringing the right commitment to the search. So my primary counsel there would be do your homework, come with really meaningful questions that not only kind of are things that you could find on a website, but that show you've done your research so that you can ask really intelligent, kind of thoughtful questions that you would expect a leader for that type of role to be thinking about. So that's kind of those are the early stages. The next part of the process is the initial interview. So that's when you will likely be scheduled either in person or by Zoom for an interview with the WittKieffer consultant who's kind of leading the search. And that's really kind of in many ways a continuation of the phone screen. Bluntly speaking, if the phone screen does not result in WittKieffer and the candidate being aligned, you're likely not moving forward to that next step in the process, which is this Zoom or in-person interview. That typically lasts about an hour and a half, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And that's an opportunity, let's be honest, for each of us to get a look at one another, for us to kind of start to develop rapport, start to kind of understand fit, personality, culture, all of those important things. It's also a great opportunity for us to understand more about your in-depth career history. So not only style, communication, and leadership competencies, but what are the major successes in your career? What are the things you're most proud of, the successes, accomplishments, and deliverables? And to Paul's point, that's the time when you want to be giving us data points and details. A few things kind of there come to mind. So first thing is answer the questions that you're being asked, right? And I don't mean to kind of be sarcastic when I say that, but this is a theme that can continue throughout the interview process. If someone asks you about, your employee engagement scores and you tell us about something else, that kind of is a potential alert that maybe you're not really listening, or maybe you're not really kind of able to bring it all together and coalesce the important elements. So think about that. Take the pause. Don't feel rushed. take that breath and really listen to the question. The other pieces of this are successes and failures. So I think it's human nature. We're all really comfortable talking about all the things that we're really good at. We're less comfortable talking about our failures, our do-overs, the learnings. And I think all three of us probably would agree that in the many years we've done this work, we've seen people at extraordinarily high levels who are absolutely dumbfounded when we or someone else on a search committee asks them about their failures. Or in another example, if someone is leaving a job and it was clearly not a good experience, and we ask, were there any learnings from that event, either during the interview process or after? And they kind of answer the question in a way which suggests that they were nothing was wrong on their end and it was always someone else. And again, I think we all know, kind of being involved with leadership, that one of the hallmarks of leadership is the ability to see both sides of the story and also to kind of take the failures and learn from them and move forward. So I think that's an important point for everyone as they have these initial interviews. Other things, and these seem basic, but you would be surprised, particularly since COVID, at how casual our society has gotten. So a few things. When you do the Zoom interview, please dress professionally. We've done Zoom interviews with people during this COVID era in shorts, in sweatshirts. We've talked to people's chins. We've talked to an eyeball, all of that. And I think it's important to not only look at ensuring your technology is working, but also look at the lighting, look at the angle of the camera, again, dress professionally. We love pets, but probably if you can put your dog or cat in another room, we'd recommend you do that, because we've talked with people whose dogs were barking. The other thing I'm going to mention, and I know as a New Yorker, we're always kind of doing a lot of things at once and we move really fast, but if at all possible, try not to interview with anyone, either the search firm or the search committee, in your car. I've talked to many people in the past few years who are insistent they don't have any time to sit in front of a computer and they want to do an interview in the car. And by the end of it, I have a little bit of motion sickness. They're kind of about to have an accident. It's just not a good dynamic. And what ends up happening, frankly, is there's a sense of them being rushed. So at some point, halfway through the interview, they just want to get off because they're getting on the freeway or whatever it may be. So if at all possible, I think we would prefer you say, I can't interview with you for another few weeks, versus I can only do it in the car on the way home in the middle of a traffic jam. So those are kind of some of the initial points about the process. So hopefully after all of those initial points, you and WittKieffer will have decided that, you're going to move forward in the process. So we will then be presenting you as a candidate to the search committee, and then that candidate will be making a selection, the search committee rather will be making a selection about who they'd like to move forward with. Again, assuming that you move forward in the process, you're going to receive this opportunity to interview with the entire search committee. One qualifier there is many of our clients are not using a search committee format. So that may not happen. What it may be instead is you're getting the opportunity to meet by Zoom with some of the leaders at an organization. But for our purposes here today, we're going to say it's a search committee format. All of the same things that we spoke about during the interview with WittKieffer really do apply here. Showing up professionally, asking good questions, really bringing a polished presentation. All of those things are super important. We will do a prep call or a Zoom with you before that interview, just to kind of surface some of the important elements that we know our client is wanting to hear more about. But I think the opportunity to meet with the search committee, I do tell folks it can be very intimidating, and sometimes folks don't believe that. But all of a sudden you have 10 or 12 people staring at you at the same time and bulleting a series of questions at you. So again, I'm going to mention it again. Make sure you answer the question you're asked. I always tell folks, start with the punchline, and then you can bring the data points in as you're answering the question. The other thing is establish early on in the interview, what makes you a unique candidate for the role and why are you interested? So kind of going back to those early things that Keisha mentioned, I think it's super important that you establish that in your opening statement. And the other thing is make your opening statement tight, concise, and organized. We have been, all of us, in search committee interviews because we observe them where an opening statement lasted literally 75% of the interview. So you could be the best candidate in the world, but if you kind of go off on a tangent and you don't come back home, you're not likely to be invited back. So think about those things. The other thing we always recommend is let your questions have impact. So we believe that a very astute question can establish you early on in the relationship consultatively with that client. What I mean by that is if you ask really smart, astute questions, it not only shows the client that you're interested in the organization, but it shows them that you are also thinking as if you're in the role already. So we really encourage people to think about those things. In terms of finishing off the first round interviews, after that's done, the search committee will make a selection about a smaller group of candidates who will be there in person to meet with the organization and the search committee and other leaders, whether that's the board, whether that's, peers or potential future direct reports. So some of my suggestions or our suggestions for the in-person interviews, what we call the finalist interviews, would be number one, it is an endurance sport. So make sure the energy you have at the beginning of the day continues through the end of the day. Hydrate, eat a power bar during the break, do whatever you need to do, because it's really easy to lose your enthusiasm and lose that energy at the end of the day. And we often see this, that the folks that met with a candidate at the beginning of the day are saying, hire that person. And the folks at the end of the day are like, we don't understand what the excitement about that candidate might be. The other thing we recommend is really, again, continue all of those earlier themes of communication, concise, organized communication, speaking about accomplishments and successes, etc. But I think it's also super important to tailor your discussion to the specific individuals that you're speaking with. So what we mean by that is if you're talking with a CFO, you're telling them your basic story, but you're also letting them understand that you understand finance and asking them some key questions about the finances. If you're speaking with the foundation director, maybe asking about giving and philanthropy and things like that. So try to astutely tailor your conversation to the audience you're speaking with. After those meetings, that full day of interviews is completed. We will then, WittKieffer will reconvene with the search committee. They will make a selection about who they'd like to bring forward. We often will, in addition, offer our clients this competency assessment. It's like this tool which allows each candidate to get information about potential areas of strength, areas of potential opportunity. That information will be shared with the candidate of choice. We will be doing reference checking. I think it's important to note that make sure whoever you provide as your references are people that you trust will not talk about the fact that you're in the market looking for a job. And the other thing is make sure that those individuals can truly speak to your accomplishments and successes. We see this a lot where people will give a reference. It might be someone who is a professional peer that they know through another advocacy organization, or they met at a conference. And that's great, but that's not as strong a reference as a former boss, a former peer, a physician leader you've worked with, a board member. The better those reference individuals are, the more information we're going to be able to secure, which will true up to what we're telling you about the candidate. So keep that in mind. That's kind of the search process in a nutshell. I'm sure that Keisha and Paul have some things to add to that, and certainly happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat here. How does layoff fit into this search approach? I think, what's important is obviously to have a very clear description and story of what happened at that organization as part of a reduction in force. I think that recruiters, talent acquisition leaders are always going to want to understand, is there a story? And so I think being succinct and clear to give the facts and the data as to what led to that layoff is really important. Offering proactively references who an organization can speak to. And then obviously it's going to be incumbent on you to really broaden your search process in ways that will just help to accelerate the things that we're talking about. Next slide, please, Soumya. And I'm going to move very quickly through these just so that we can open up to questions. So, when you have accepted an offer, obviously the resignation process is an important one to handle with grace, with clarity. The last thing you want to do is burn a bridge with an organization that you've been a part of. So, expect an exit interview of things that you will be asked. So much of this, I would say, is commonsensical, but it's being graceful. We have seen some very talented leaders leave organizations in ways that have ended up really causing them some harm by things that they tell teammates, the things that they will just share. And so you just want to be graceful. That's really kind of a bottom line. Next slide, please, Soumya. And finally, if there are at the end of a job selection process, that's you're not chosen. We all get bruised a bit when that's the case. So you want to take some time to obviously dust yourself off, deal with just the natural aspects of what not being chosen will be. But then quickly pivot to an aspect of where you can reflect. What did you learn from that process? What are some things you perhaps could have done differently or better? And then obviously just continue to focus on the connections and relationships that will get you back on the trail. I know there's sometimes I've had candidates say, they're just going to take time away and stop their process, and you just want to continue on after you've had some period of reflection and recovery, if you will. So thanks, Soumya. We'll take down the slide deck here. And Keisha, let me ask you one of the questions that's in the chat. So after an initial conversation with a recruiter from a search firm and after sending them a thank you, how long should somebody wait to follow up?
Typically, you're able to get the timeline of the search. So when the consultant plans to meet with that client or that hiring organization. But I would say best practice, I would say following up every 2 to 3 weeks. And typically you will get a response of, hey, we're not meeting for the next month. Oh, we have an update called next week. Sometimes the update is we have no update. Sometimes that is the case. But I think if you're actively engaged in the search, you're really interested in the opportunity, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, but I would try to get the timeline of the search and, when they plan to shortlist candidates and move candidates forward early on, because that helps you to set and manage expectations of when you should be hearing back. I will also say you should also update the consultant, the recruiter that you're working with on any changes. Did you take on additional responsibility? Is there another competing recruitment opportunity that you're working on? If anything changes on your end, reach out and let them know what's going on.
Great. Lisa, before I turn to you to answer one of the questions, I want to address one of the questions, which is how does WittKieffer rank or comment about candidates when presenting to a client? We do not rank.
Right.
So our role as objective brokers, if you will, in a search process is to bring a candidate an objective assessment of what we see the most relevant skills, competencies, aspects of one's background, the motivations, obviously, for a candidate. But frankly, I think search consultants get in trouble from a credibility perspective if it seems like we're really advocating in a specific way. So while we bring judgment to support our clients through a process, we also have to make sure that the process remains objective and that our informing client is also not biasing a client in a way that has it seem like our finger is on the scale of a discernment and a decision which is their own. Lisa, we have a question. If one's job title is unique at their organization, but the same position would be called something else in a like organization, what's your recommendation to put that down on a resume and keeping a job title unique?
That's a great question. So I think it's important to make sure that the job title, your current job title, is reflected on the resume. You don't want to start changing that, but I think there is an opportunity in the description after the title for you to really talk about the things you've done that might suggest that the role is different than it's titled. Certainly when you're meeting with the search consultant in the phone screen early on in the process and then subsequently, I also think it's important to make that case to them. You don't want to oversell it, but to talk about who you're reporting to, who's reporting to you. Those are other indications to people like us that the role may have a different title than the actual responsibilities. So I actually had this recently happen on a CEO search that closed yesterday, where, believe it or not, initially, there was no interest in seeing a candidate because of exactly this situation. But we were able to speak with the search committee about it and say, okay, respectfully, you've got this wrong, that, the individual is the equivalent of a CEO, but they're embedded in a much larger system, and their revenue responsibilities are X and their direct reports are Y. So those are other things that you can do. Taught to really convey to the search consultant early on that the scope of the role may not match the title.
Keisha, one other question is the information we're talking about with the search firm lens that we're giving here applicable and relate to an internal search through HR, through talent acquisition with an organization? What would you say is relevant, applicable, and what might be a little different?
I think they're extremely relatable, actually, especially when it comes to the point of building the relationship, connecting, really partnering with the internal recruiter. So typically for searches that we are working on as the external search firm, we're normally partnering with an internal recruiter. So an executive recruiter, a VP of talent acquisition, we are normally working shoulder to shoulder with those individuals as well as the hiring manager. So there's a lot of the process that is very similar. I will actually say, though, that I think with the search firm, going back to the question about job titles, a lot of times we have a lot more information and knowledge of knowing how certain organizations are structured from our previous experiences. So we may know, like, hey, people from this organization, they have a different title, but they can do well here. Or people from, this area tend to transition well into this organization. We will also give you, again, tips and tricks to really make sure that you're putting your best self forward. So we will be there to advocate for you, again, really making sure that you're presenting your best self to the client. Again, we are doing this with other people. Internal recruiters are doing it as well, but our job is to make ourselves look good and to make the internal recruiter that we're working with look good. So a lot of the process is very similar. I would just say, working with a search firm, we can just have a lot of knowledge, a lot of insider information, and we're able to really assess, reference. We have huge networks, which allows us to cast a much broader net than a lot of the internal recruiters may have. We will actively source you, reach out to you, and you may not even be considering an opportunity. You may have wondered, how did I get your phone number or your text message? How can I send you a text message? And, we have tools and resources and teams that are identifying that information, finding who are the up and comers, who's doing this type of work. So we are proactively reaching out to individuals.
I know we're getting close to time, and Soumya will take another couple of questions here before we connect back with Darren. But one of the questions, and I think I understand it, but I want to make sure, is how do you recommend using your network to look for jobs while currently in a job, especially if a company of interest does business with you or your company? I mean, I think part of that is, certainly using your network to every extent that you can to make the calls, make the outreach, set up informational conversations. If the question is about confidentiality, if a company is doing business with your company, of course, you want to be very mindful of the person that you might be speaking with at that organization. and reinforcing the criticality of confidentiality for you, and that if there's any issue around that could impact their candidacy, just having a very honest, clear request initially about confidentiality, so that you won't be in a jeopardy situation. And then lastly, should a resume be shortened to one page so that it can stand out? One page is tight, but some of the answer there is going to depend on where you are in your career. If you've been in the job world for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that may be very appropriate. If you've been working for a dozen, 15 years, I might wonder if it's really going to sing enough for you and telling your story effectively. But I like the idea of brevity, succinctness. I think I can speak safely for Keisha and Lisa. If we get a 9-page resume and clearly 6 pages of it are pretty fluffy, prune it down to something that's effective. So, Soumya, thanks for pulling the screen back up, and I'd love to turn it over to Darren to close us out. Hey, Darren.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for such a insightful and valuable discussion for our members here at Healthcare Leaders of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Darren Daraj, and I'm your president-elect. I just want to say thank you again to Lisa, Paul, and Keisha for really such a wonderful discussion on, how we, navigate the landscape of transition. And really utilize the tools and resources we have, both in terms of our partners within Healthcare Leaders of New York, ACHE, and other resources abroad and globally that can help our members to advance. So thank you to this incredible panel. Just a reminder to our members, in terms of the credited event that this is, please make sure that you're going into self-report for the credits for qualifying education at the ACHE website. So please make sure you're doing that. In terms of today's event, please, feedback helps us grow and do better. So please scan the QR code that you see on your screen and let us know how the event today went, and give us feedback as to how we can continue to improve, do better, and continue value for our membership. Next slide. In terms of upcoming events, we're so fortunate to have such partners throughout the tri-state area. Our upcoming events to help both connect our members, provide opportunity for our members and connection would be the Walk for St. Mary's Kids, which is Sunday, June 2nd. Our annual Healthcare Leaders of New York annual gala and awards presentation, which will be June 11th. And of course, our Administrative Fellowship 101, which is our virtual credited event. So we hope to see everyone there. Please, even as this event became a little bit at capacity, amazingly enough, and it really speaks to the topic and the work we all do and value for our members, please register early and register and participate and join us at our upcoming events. And as always, we cannot do the work we do, we cannot add value, and we cannot provide the support to our incredible members here at Healthcare Leaders of New York without the support, the value, the contribution, and participation of our sponsors. So thank you so much to our Platinum, Gold, Silver, Friends of Hilney sponsors for all that you do to support our mission and continue the value proposition for our membership. Thank you again. We have on the last slide, of course, if there should be any connection back to our WittKieffer team, their emails in terms of those questions are there in terms of collaboration and connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, on behalf of Healthcare Leaders of New York, our executive board, the panelists, and our team, thank you. Have a great afternoon and day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Healthcare Leaders of New York event. Have a good one. Bye.